Bruce Wayne and Batman are not the same person. One is a reserved, mild-mannered billionaire, and the other is a crime-fighting detective. And yet, we are told that despite a massive shift in personality and also physical appearance, Bruce Wayne and Batman are essentially the same person. Batman is essentially Bruce Wayne in Lycra. And I think this is really interesting. Duality in a single character prompts questions not just in fiction but in our own life. How do we recognize somebody as the same person despite changes in time, personality, or even appearances? Changes as drastic as, or even more drastic as, the changes between Bruce Wayne and Batman. I mean, this dilemma of dual identities isn't just limited to Batman. Clark Kent and Superman, they're two sides of the same coin. They're the same individual. And I mean, even in movies like Freaky Friday, where the main characters literally swap bodies, they're still shown to deep down be the same individual with the same core identity, just navigating new and unfamiliar lives. But let's step outside of the realm of fiction just for a minute. Because whilst it might not be possible to switch bodies or be a superhero, we still constantly evolve and change. I mean, consider your own life. Think about who you were 5 years ago, or even just a year ago. Your relationships, your personality, your outlook on the world, and now think of yourself today. And despite all of these changes, something fundamental has remained throughout this time. Something that lets you say, that was me. I'm going to tell you a story that is adapted from the thought experiments of famous philosopher Williams. And then you can decide for yourself what it really is that constitutes your own identity. In a small town where nothing much happened lived an odd scientist named Dr. X. Dr. X was known for his eccentric ideas and was obsessed with finding out what makes us us. And one day, he decided to put his latest invention to the test. He invited 2 volunteers down to his lab to try out his new experiment. Alice, an extroverted traveler, and Bob, a cautious accountant. Dr. X announced to both of them that he had invented a machine that could switch both of their personalities but keep their bodies the same. This meant that the memories and the personality of Alice would be switched into the body of Bob, and vice versa. Very similar to the plot of Freaky Friday. However, before they both underwent the procedure, Dr. X announced that there would be a twist. And he said that post-swap, one of these people would win the lottery and they would be presented with fortunes beyond their wildest dreams. However, that the other body would be locked away and tortured for a very, very long time. The catch was that both Alice and Bob would have to decide who would get each outcome before they entered the machine. And after some thought, Alice decided that she would retain her identity even though she was in Bob's body, and Bob actually decided the same. So, with their decisions made, they both stepped into the machine. So the machine whirred into action. And soon, Alice and Bob emerged, but not as they were before. Alice, in her body, now had all of Bob's personality traits and his memory, and Bob's body now had all of Alice's personality traits and memory. They had switched bodies. The next day, it was revealed that Alice, now with all of Bob's memory and personality, had won the lottery, and Bob, with Alice's memory and personality, had to suffer the torture. Now, Dr. X suggested that it would be the person that inhabited Alice's body, or in this case, Bob, that would be happy, to receive the fortune and win the lottery. And this is said to be the basis for your mind constituting your identity and your personal persistence throughout time. If you were in this situation and you were in the machine, which mind would you want to be tortured and which body would you want to win the lottery? Do you think the basis of your personal identity is something purely psychological? But what if I told you that Dr. X had a new experiment that proved that it was your body that constituted your personal identity? One day, in the same town and the same lab, Dr. X had a new experiment to show. And this time, he had a new and peculiar device for a willing volunteer called Charlie. Now, this device could predict the future. And unfortunately for Charlie, this device predicted that he would be tortured horribly the next day. Understandably, Charlie is obviously frightened and very apprehensive. However, like with all of Dr. X's experiments, there is a catch. Dr. X informs Charlie that before the torture happens, he will have no memory or recollection of being told about the torture. Just like we saw in the first experiment, not only would Charlie have no memory of being told about the torture, he would actually have the memories and the personality of some completely different person. Well, in fact, if you think about this is just one side of the first experiment presented a little bit differently. And this raises a crucial question. If Charlie doesn't remember being told about the torture, or actually doesn't have any of the memories that the original Charlie even had, would it still be Charlie that endures the torture? And here's where it gets a little bit interesting. If you ask Charlie if he would be scared upon being informed of his impending torture, of course course his answer would be yes, he'd be petrified. But if you then ask Charlie if he'd be scared during the torture and whilst it's all happening, even if he had no memories or recollection of being told about it, of course he'd still be scared. Absolutely, anybody would be scared. And this seems to propose the idea that it's Charlie's body, not his mind, that constitutes identity. And this goes completely against what we saw in the first story, which suggested that it was your mind and something psychological that dictated your identity. But now, just for a minute, I want you to put yourself in Charlie's shoes. In this fictional situation, imagine that you were now stepping into this machine that could read your future, and you were given the same fate as Charlie. Well, is your answer any different to the first experiment? What do you value more? Is it your body, your limbs, your physical things, the things you can touch and see and feel? Or is it your mind? Is it something that's less visible and something that, I don't know, runs a bit deeper? So the thing with both of these experiments is they highlight a really crucial question underpins our identity. What truly makes us who we are? There's no right answer to this, and it's going to vary from person to person. In everyday life, we don't face such extreme scenarios from a wacky fictional scientist, but we still change and evolve. We constantly grow, learn, meet new people, but we still retain this sense of self. We're the same person, just at a different time. But then this kind of poses another question. How drastically can we change while still being the same person? With that said, I want you to think about this. Imagine you're riding a motorbike and then all of a sudden you get into a horrific accident and you have to get one of your limbs amputated. Not only that, the limb is replaced by a prosthetic version, something bionic, robotic, whatever you want. This is quite a drastic change in your physical appearance. Does it alter who you are? What about if you get dementia? Or again, you suffer some sort of traumatic brain injury where you get amnesia and then forget all of your memories and experiences up until that point. Were you still the same person? Or here's one like most of us can hopefully relate to at some point as well. What about all of the changes that you endure from being like a 1-year-old baby all the way up until your 80, 90-year-old pensioner? Are you still the same person? Even still, you might bear no resemblance to the person you were just a few minutes ago. You might have shifted and changed in a psychological or a physical way so drastically, you don't resemble the person at all. I think the common link between all of these examples is that they show us that identity, if anything, is defined by change. That maybe our identity is not solely anchored in our physical appearance, but it's also not just our psychological experiences either. Maybe it's a mix between the two. And maybe it's the changes that we undergo. It might not be as extreme as getting a prosthetic limb, but certainly aging or learning new things, or maybe even a bereavement. And it's this change that defines our identity. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. There's so many different opinions on this. What do you think is the feature that links you as you through different moments of time? But what I will say from this is that there's so many experiences you'll have along your life that kind of challenge who you think you are as a person. Just an example for me is when I was in Mexico and I nearly died. So that made me kind of value more than just my physical body. If you're interested in hearing more about that, just check out the video, which should be around here. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed the video, please let me know what you do in these situations. Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear. Leave a like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you all soon.